Michigan Democratic Senator Gary Peters has officially announced he will not be seeking re-election for the U.S. Senate in the 2026 midterms. This is very big and important news that could greatly impact how big one party controls the Senate or the other. In this video, I'm going to break down this news and what my own personal analysis and interpretation is for the 2026 Senate elections. Gary Peters, Michigan senior senator and a former congressman, said he will not seek re-election next year and will retire from the U.S. Senate when his second term ends in January of 2027. In an exclusive interview, the Bloomfield Township Democrat told the Detroit News that he is ready to leave public office in 2 years and move on to a new chapter that includes spending more time with his family, particularly a new grandchild who lives on the West Coast. Peters said, quote, "I always thought there would be a time that I would step aside and pass the reins for the next generation. I also never saw service in Congress as something you do for your whole life," said Peters, who was first elected to the Senate in 2014. And that goes back to 2008 when I first won the House seat. I thought it would be for a matter of only a few terms that I would serve, and then I would go back to private life. Peters' decision is likely to surprise many of his colleagues and ignite an intense scramble on both sides of the aisle for his seat in the battleground Michigan. At 66 years old, Peters is a relatively young for a U.S. Senator, but after 10 years in the Senate and 6 in the House, he has decided to pass the torch to a younger generation. He has other things he wants to do, like finding endless winding roads for his Harley Davidson, he said. It's a decision he's been mulling for several months. I think this is a pretty normal for everybody to say, I've done a job and I'm proud of the job I did, but there are other things I want to do in my life. There are other ways that I can give back to my community, Peters said. I want to be very clear, and this is a very, very important part, especially for the purpose of this video. I am not retiring. I'm just not running for re-election in the Senate. I hope, God willing, I have a lot more good years ahead. Asked if he would run for governor of Michigan or any other elected office, Peters said no. He's instead focused on finishing strong for his last 2 years in the Senate, where he serves as the top Democrat on the Senate Homeland Security panel and is the new co-chair of the Auto Caucus. There's still a lot of work to do. We have issues related to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, natural disasters, cybersecurity, border security, and I'm intimately involved in all these issues and will continue to do that. The great thing is this really allows me to just be completely focused on the day-to-day work that I do as a U.S. Senator and fight for the issues that are important to the people here in Michigan. So this is absolutely huge, crucial news. Because right now, in the 2026 Senate elections, we can officially say that Gary Peters is retiring, and the Wikipedia page hasn't exactly quite updated yet, as this is still very new information. But when we want to look at the 2026 Senate map, right now, there's about 6 races that I saw being really competitive or potentially competitive at the Senate level. Ohio, right now, I'm really just waiting to see who the Republicans, or it is John Husted, I'm really waiting to see who the Democrats put up on the Democratic side. If it's Sherrod Brown, I think this race could at least start out as likely Republican, maybe lean Republican. But these 6 races are the ones I would consider. And just to give you a quick synopsis of how I think it's going right now, Ohio, I'd probably put in either safe Republican or likely Republican. Maine would probably be likely Republican as well. New Hampshire, I would start out as lean Democrat, which may sound a little surprising, but I do think it's going to be very, very close. I do expect Scott Brown will run for that race. North Carolina right now is a pure toss-up. I'm narrowly going to have it as tilt Republican until the outgoing Democratic governor in a few years, the outgoing Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, announces he's running for that seat. That could change depending on how things are going there. Which leads 2 states, Georgia and Michigan. Both of these Senate seats are currently held by Democrats. These are by far the closest Senate races of the election cycle, in my view, before Gary Peters even announced his intentions of not running again. I'm going to show you now a brief history of Gary Peters' track record running in Michigan. So, in 2020, the last time Peters was on the ballot, he defeated his Republican opponent, John James, by just 1.7%, a very, very close race. He was elected back in 2014 in a much larger margin at 13.3%. So only winning by 1.7% in 2020 in a very strong Democratic year for a presidential election based on how the votes ended up going, that was very, very significant and a very close race. Now, of course, we did just see the presidential election happen, and Donald Trump won the state of Michigan at the presidential level 49.7% to 48.3% over Vice President Kamala Harris. Trump won here by a margin of about 1.4%. But what you may not know is Michigan also had a Senate race up in 2024 in the election as well. And this was also an open Senate seat where the Democratic incumbent Debbie Stabenow announced she would not be running for re-election and it would be an open seat. And in this one, the Democrat Lisa Slotkin barely won this race, 48.6% to the Republican Mike Rogers, 48.3%, a Libertarian candidate getting 1% of the vote, playing spoiler in this election. So neither candidate broke 50% of the vote, like we saw Gary Peters do back in 2020. He also was just a bit shy at 49.9%. So the Democrats, at least in these last two Senate elections, have not broken above 50% in either one. Now that Gary Peters has announced that he is not going to run, this presents the Republicans a really big opportunity at, instead of running against a Democratic incumbent who likely would have been not very vulnerable, but pretty vulnerable. I think you'd probably concede that the best Republican pickup would be Georgia, second best would be Michigan for 2026. But now we just saw an open Senate seat in Michigan go for the Democrat by just 0.3%. We may be in for another very, very close Senate race in the state of Michigan going into the 2026 Senate map. So this news that Gary Peters will not be running for this seat is absolutely crucial, and the stakes could not be higher. So now, of course, Gary Peters has announced he's not going to be running for the seat in 2 years. The question has to be asked, who will the candidates be? And obviously, as I showed you the Wikipedia page right now, there are no candidates currently listed. It's obviously just breaking like a few minutes ago. I think it broke 10 minutes ago before I'm recording this video, so it's going to be way too soon for anything to pop up. But I do have some names off the top of my head I would be watching for potentially for this seat. I'll start on the Democratic side. The first candidate I can think of is the outgoing governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. In 2026, she will be term limited by Michigan's constitution and cannot run again. She would be a very strong candidate to run for this seat, and even though she's very disliked by a lot of Republicans, her poll numbers among Democrats are still very high, and that would give her at very least a strong starting position to run for the state of Michigan at the Senate level. I wouldn't go so far as saying she's sort of on par with Brian Kemp and his approval rating in Georgia, but I don't think she's too far behind in that realm of having a popular term-limited governor running for the Senate seat. So the first Democrat I think of in Michigan would be Gretchen Whitmer. I just think it makes all the sense in the world she would entertain running for a Senate seat like that. On the Republican side of things, and there's a reason I stayed on the 2024 map, I think Republican Representative or former Representative Mike Rogers, who ran for this seat, at very least may take a look at running for this race again. I'm not sure if he will, but seeing as he only lost by 0.3%, and we did just see a Republican who ran for Senate before and didn't even make the general election but lost in the primary, run again and win, in Dave McCormick in neighboring Pennsylvania. So we did just see that happen. I think Mike Rogers, at very least, could not be ruled out at this time. But of course, there are numerous other candidates that could potentially be running for this race, and there are also some candidates running for governor in Michigan who maybe could potentially be interested in flipping from that race to the other race. And actually, you know what? Let's do that. Let's look at the governor elections for 2024. Let's look at the state of Michigan. The Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has declared interest in running for this race, as has Pete Buttigieg. Of course, you know him. He's a very popular name. He expressed interest in running, as well as Garland Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor of Michigan. Maybe one of these three decide, you know what, instead of being in a tough battle for the governor primary, maybe one of them will split off and run for the Senate seat, especially if Gretchen Whitmer decides not to run. On the Republican side of things, there are some potential Republicans here as well. Mike Cox, the former Michigan Attorney General and candidate for governor in 2010, he explored a committee for governor, but maybe he switches to Senate. Tudor Dixon, she ran in 2022 against Gretchen Whitmer for governor. I actually would not really be too shocked to see a Gretchen Whitmer versus Tudor Dixon rematch, but in the Senate race this time around, that honestly would not surprise me that much at all. Maybe John James, who ran for Senate last time, decides it's going to be an open seat this time. He's not facing an incumbent. Maybe he can get more votes than Mike Rogers did in terms of certain areas of the state, maybe suburban areas. Maybe he'll give his luck with that. So Michigan's going to be very, very fascinating to start off. I think it's pretty fair to say, sort of how I have North Carolina and tilt Republican right now. I think depending on the candidates, I could see North Carolina and Michigan both being completely total toss-ups right now. Georgia, I'm also leaving as toss-up as I'm anticipating Brian Kemp's decision. I do think Georgia's favored to go to the Republicans if Kemp does run. Kind of like North Carolina, I'm waiting for the candidates to really declare before I kind of jump the gun on that one. New Hampshire, it's looking like almost 100% certain that Scott Brown will run, so that's why I'm going off the assumption of that one. But Michigan, if I had to start out today, it's really tough because Donald Trump just won the state, but 2026 should be a more beneficial Democratic year based on the history of presidential midterms. Typically, the off party not in power does better, and seeing as they just won by under 1% in an open Senate race, I would have to start the Michigan race off probably as tilt Democrat right now. But this is certainly going to be one of the closest races in the 2026 Senate elections, and really it starts like right now. There's not going to be a long time, I think, for people to be like, oh, who's going to run for this race or not. I think we're going to actually see this move kind of quick, and a lot of Democratic candidates in Michigan sort of potentially get a jump on running for this race if they really covet this position. If not, if they don't, that could be a sign that Gretchen Whitmer is seriously entertaining running for this race, and they're waiting for her to make her decision before the field starts to kind of carry before that. But now Michigan, I honestly had Michigan starting off as lean Democrat in the 2026 Senate map. At least now I move it down to lean Democrat. This news, Gary Peters is retiring, at least for right now, is good news for the Republicans. It makes the seat more winnable for the Republicans. But this does no way mean the Republicans are going to 100% win this race, or even like 51% win this race. I think this race is going to be a pure toss-up leading through Election Day, and it's going to be one of the closest in the country, and could end up even being closer than Georgia if Brian Kemp does decide to run against Jon Ossoff. So this is a very fascinating development, and I can't wait to do more videos on this in the future as more information comes out about this Michigan Senate race. So this is very, very important information. Gary Peters is not running for re-election in 2026 in Michigan, and this is going to greatly affect the Republican prospects of picking up another Senate seat in 2026 in a Senate map where the Democrats looked like initially they're more poised to potentially do better and pick up a few seats. Now Republicans have two potential pickup opportunities that could conceivably go their way. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really, really, really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.